welcome back to another episode of the Fearless Youth Pod. And this week is Mental Health Week, and our theme is mental health in the workplace. So we have a very special guest. His name is Nathan Ade. He's an animator, poet, rapper. Um, I'm pretty sure there's some other things missing, a creative entrepreneur. And we're just going to be talking about a little bit about what he does and his brand and about mental health, specifically about creatives, young creatives in the industry. So, Nathan, thank you for joining us.
Hello, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Daniel.
How are you doing?
Yeah, doing all right. Quite busy these days, but
Oh,
grateful
yeah,
to doing what I'm doing.
I can imagine. Okay. So, tell me more about, so let's start with animation because I know that you did your bachelor's in animation, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So tell me, how did that go? Why did you even choose to do animation in the first place?
Yeah, so in summary, it's I've always loved drawing. I've always loved cartoons. And yeah, I think during my childhood, I had a fascination with different kinds of stories that could be told. So, long story short, that's how I got into animation. It was something that I was thinking about for a number of years. Um, yeah, so I studied animation at University of Derby, and I'm based in Derby now. And yeah, I actually started at Ravensbourne, um, which is a London-based university. Did the first year there, and then as me and my family were moving to Derby, I decided to move university as well. So yeah, that was a journey. Really enjoyed the course. During the degree, I started entering different external briefs and competitions, and it was from then onwards, around 2019 onwards, that as I started submitting work to different festivals and competitions, that I realized that it's having a certain impact on people. So yeah, and then that obviously towards the end of my degree was kind of um, what also marked the start of the birth of Mental Roots as well.
Yeah, and you've also won multiple awards for your films, and one was even published on the BBC, right?
Yes, yes. So the Mental Roots animation, Mental
Yeah.
Roots is the name of that short film that was commissioned by the BBC through a scheme called New Creatives. So it was in conjunction with a production company called Rural Media. So that short film, um, again, I started working on it just at the end of my degree slash start of my master's. So this was 2020. And I had this idea of trying to look at mental health from a black male perspective, just normalizing the idea of young black men being vulnerable about their emotions, not giving into negative stereotypes, and removing the mask of masculinity that culture says that they have to hide behind in order to be real men, quote unquote. So yeah, it's just you know um, a film that I felt I wanted to make to encourage myself as well to keep growing in awareness of my own emotions and not overworking myself. So that's part of the personal motivation behind it. And long story short, it's become now a multimedia brand, which has also won a few awards, through which I do workshops and different creative commissions for projects and things that just help marginalize young people open up about mental health and use creative expression as a way of processing their emotions and empowering others around them. So yeah, recently I've just been contacting schools in Nottingham as well as Derby, and also open to other parts of the country as well, just to do innovative workshops in which I will play my animation. And there is an animated sequel to that first Mental Roots animation as well. And so, yeah, the dream really is to carry on with those, see how much work I can book with schools, and yeah, preferably go full time with that, and hopefully find some funding to create more short animated content, to inform the sessions, as well as different projects that I could do collaboratively, with other young people from diverse backgrounds.
Honestly, that's really such an inspiration. I feel like we don't talk about mental health, especially when it regards to men, as often as we should. So it's really like very inspirational, very lovely, and I'm just really inspired by what you're doing. So you touched on your animation film, so Mental Roots, that was the name of one of your first animation films. Yeah. So you created a brand out of this film. The
Yeah.
name of the brand is Mental Roots.
Yes.
So tell me more about mental roots in itself. So you said that you do workshops for
Hmm.
animation films, and you speak about mental health through these
Yes.
animation films. So what is the reception that you receive from these young people? Because,
Mm.
they might be interested in the film, but how do they feel about you talking about mental health as well, or bringing up such sensitive or very like topics that most persons would not want to talk about on a daily basis. What's that like?
That's a really good question. For me, I believe in something called creative activism. Um, I wouldn't say I've there's like a certain person who's coined that term. It's just a word that or a phrase that I've thought of that best summarizes my approach. I feel like my role as a creative is not only just to make work that looks good, but also work that does good. That's a little slogan that informs the way I create because even throughout my degree, and I think a big thing that helps me as well with that is being a Christian. So being someone of faith, it helps me have a bigger why behind what I do. So, and this is not to say creating art and animation that just looks good and that's playful. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think when I look at the issues that are happening in the world, when I look at number one, the lack of representation of Black culture, especially Black British culture in mainstream animation, that makes me think, well, okay, there's a gap in the market, but it's not just about putting black faces on screen, but it's about the quality of the representation, and it's about having a positive impact on communities that are normally underrepresented or marginalized. And I feel like my role as a Christian is to use the gifts that God has given me, to add value to society and help people in a positive way. So yeah, that's pretty much behind the heart behind what I do. Even before Mental Roots came about, that was the approach I was starting to apply to podcasting that I was starting to do in my spare time, and even a few poetry and rap freestyles I started doing would have positive messages in it. So that's been part of me ever since my early teens. And so with that being said, for the Mental Roots workshops, so just to give you a brief timeline, the Mental Roots animation, the first one, it came out on BBC Four at the end of 2021. 2022 was when by that time I'd already started the Mental Roots podcast as well, which you can check out on all platforms, like the platform that the listeners are listening to this right now.
Yeah,
And yeah, the Mental Roots podcast was started during the production of the first film, kind of as a research base to inform the first film, whilst, me talking to other young Black adults like yourself, hearing their lived experiences and things like that. And from that podcast, I got even more of a realization of number one, how much of a stigma mental health is in the Black community. There's all sorts of stats within the UK proving that Black people are multiple times more likely to develop severe sort of diagnosis with conditions like schizophrenia, especially amongst Black men. And schizophrenia, by the way, is like an umbrella term for different conditions where someone loses touch with reality. So they might have hallucinations, and a lot of these things can be induced by different trauma. So it could be certain types of severe trauma that trigger that. It could quite often in the Black community, especially amongst young Black men, it's drug induced. So because of the injustices that be, because of negative role models, because of lack of a positive male role model, these are common factors amongst young Black men that might prompt them or that might tempt them to numb their pain through drug induced
drug
sort of
use.
behavior.
Yeah,
And that's a common trigger that can lead to, schizophrenia and, more specific conditions like bipolar disorder, which fits under schizophrenia. So that's just one kind of little example. We haven't even talked about generational trauma yet and the trauma
Yeah.
of, racism that, a lot of our parents experienced when migrating from, Africa or the Caribbean to come to
Yeah.
the UK. And, kind of this stiff upper lip, how you have to work twice as hard as your white peers. All of these different things make it so hard to not only talk about mental health within the Black community, but even for a Black person to even understand their own emotions to begin with, you know, like um binary sort of emotions like anger or being quote unquote sassy or all of these labels that
Yeah.
we might be given in school at the workplace because people don't understand, and a lot of the time we don't even understand the root behind why we behave the way we behave, why we grieve the way we grieve, why we process things the way we do. And I think just normalizing the conversation of it's okay not to be okay, but also don't be a victim as well. There are things that you can do to improve your mindset to help you move forward. You are not just a product of your environment. You do not have to think with a poverty mentality. There is more to where you are in life and what you've experienced. There is more to life than those things that you've experienced and the environment that you're familiar with. So it's
Yeah.
just encouraging young people, especially young people from global majority backgrounds. So that includes Black and mixed race and Asian, young people
Yeah,
as
of
well.
course.
And I do that. The animation helps normalize the conversation because when you watch the animation for yourself, I don't know if you've had a chance to see it yet.
Yeah.
Um, so you can probably tell from that animation, that, there's spoken word poetry in there. It's personal, it feels authentic, even though the main
Yeah.
character is, um, fictional. Me narrating the voice of the character and, some of what is in the storyline is kind of inspired by my own experience as well. It isn't authentic, and when I've shown it in a few young people workshops, especially with the Black students, it's definitely resonated with them. There's a school in Derby called Bemro School, which is very multicultural. I think over 50% Asian, but there's a growing Black population there as well. And the first workshop I did with them was focused on mental health and creativity. So it's basically normalizing the conversation around what racial or cultural specific factors are affecting your mental health as young people. And I think that's a niche within mental health that is yet to be further explored in the mainstream. There's a lot of great charities and a lot of organizations and advocates who are raising awareness on mental health. And yes, diet has a massive impact. Social media has a massive impact. And it's great to see education on these things becoming more popular through social media and things like that. However, when it comes to racial and cultural factors, I think we're yet to see more diverse advocates for mental health.
Yeah.
It's not just having to be white professionals all the time. We need young Black people, young Asian people, young people of different ethnic backgrounds to be advocates for their own communities as well. Because it's hard to open up about something so vulnerable when you don't see relatable role models who are doing that. And there is a cultural impact on mental health. Racism does have an impact on mental health. Injustices and equality does affect the quality of service that um, Black and brown people get when it comes to mental health services. So these things need to be talked about and in a very authentic way that speaks the language of the community you're trying to reach. And also, I know growing up as a Gen Zer, like technology and film and media and art is basically the biggest way to
Yeah.
engage young people. If we want to have multi-generational impact, we need to look at helping the younger generation. And how are we going to impact the younger generation of today? Through the mediums that they spend so much of their time consuming, which is film, which is the creative arts, and
Yeah.
empowering them to realize that you don't just have to be consumers of this media. Like, as you learn more about yourself and your mental health and stuff like that, you can use media to become an influencer as well. You don't just have to be influenced all the time. You can become a positive influencer, using new technologies, using performing arts and all these things to have a positive educational impact. So that's what I'm teaching in these workshops. And, in my standard workshop, I have an activity where the young people get into groups and think, if you had unlimited resources, if you had unlimited money, and etc., what dream solution would you create to help normalize and help young people from your background in their
Mhm.
mental health? Is there a certain series that you would invent? Would it be a podcast? Would it be a film? So it's getting them to think about creative solutions that they can use. And the hope with Mental Roots moving forward, as I do more of these workshops, as I hopefully get more funding, and I'm hopefully able to build a small team within the next couple of years. The dream really is to help get some of these visions from the young people and make them happen. So the solutions that the young people are creating in the sessions, we actually look at that, and the dream is to be with a school or a college and be like, okay, in this session or that session, young people have come up with this solution. They want to create a podcast, or they want to create a mini series, or a mini YouTube series or something. As a college, how can we work with you to actually make this vision happen, so that we're empowering these young people to put their creative skills to use, and it's leaving a legacy within um charities and academic institutions, because it's not just about being the standard black guy who comes in to solve all the equality and diversity issues. I'm not here to just tick a box, an EDI box for institutions. I'm here to leave a legacy, so that when I leave a certain institution, they have a framework or a system of how they keep authentic ethnic representation going. So it might be a certain focus group that I might inspire a school to do, and then they keep doing that within their school. And that might be a great way of helping that school better meet the emotional and mental needs of ethnically diverse people within that organization, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the main service that Mental Roots as a business provides. And on the side as well, I'm doing animation commissions as well. I've, for example, later this year, towards the end of this year, there should be the launch of a project from Cambridge University and another organization that is raising awareness on sickle cell and real stories behind, people living with sickle cell disease, which disproportionately affects Black people. And I got to work as an animator, a freelance animator, to animate one part of a mini documentary they're going to put out, that follows the story of a Ghanaian woman, telling her story of sickle cell. So little commissions like that in some way raise awareness on the health or identity of Black and brown people. Any animated or media commission that I can do, I do it under the Mental Roots brand as well. So that's basically what the impact that Mental Roots has had and what we're looking to do moving forward.
Yeah. So you touched a little bit on generational trauma, which
Mm,
you did briefly speak about that in your film. I remember one of the lines was something like basically going to your parents and telling them that you're having mental health issues, and they're basically saying, okay, well, I'm having a hard time as well. Um,
mm,
yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about creatives and their mental health, especially in regards to family, because being a creative entrepreneur, anything social media related, um, I wouldn't say that it's looked down upon, but many families, especially if you're from an Afro-Caribbean background, they don't understand being a creative. They don't understand what it entails, and
mm.
they to be honest, they really just think that it's a waste of time. So, have you like spoken to, from your workshops, have you spoken to any young individuals who have expressed interest in being creatives and not understanding or not sure how to approach their parents with
Mm.
these type of topics about mom, dad, this is what I want to be instead of a doctor, lawyer, etc.
That's a really good question. So far, I mean, it's only a small handful of workshops that I've done, so I don't have tons of data yet. But this year, actually, there was a multi-school project. I don't know if you've heard of DanCop. So it's the Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire College Outreach Program or something like that.
Okay.
So they're an organization that does workshops to prepare young people for higher education and just informing them of different routes that they can take, career routes that they can take moving forward, and equipping them with the needed life skills to prepare them for adulthood, really. So what they do is just a lot of workshops and projects with schools within Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. So one of the projects that they've done, and it's about 2 years deep. This project is called Future Leaders, and it's their attempt really to try and especially engage young Black people, mainly around year 10. So we're looking at around 14 to 15 years old. And it's really just to address attainment gaps within university where we're seeing a lot of people or young Black people start university, but there's a disproportionate um, result in terms of the grades that they get and even their ability to finish the courses and the support that they get throughout university. So it's just about empowering young Black people um, to have the right approach to success, and yeah, just having more self-confidence so that when wherever they do go for higher education or work, they've got enough of a strong identity within themselves to carry them so that they're not as easily swayed by, negative influences or, so it's just
Opinions of
about
others.
building.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's just about building um a success mindset within young Black people using relatable role models. And I think Dancop have done a good job, including this year with finding various people like myself and other organizations to authentically engage these young Black people and meet them culturally where they're at. So shout out to the Dancop team and to Abby Whitehead as well, who I believe that's her last name. Hopefully, I didn't get her last name wrong. She was leading it the kind of this year, so shout out to her. But I'm using that as a case study. So when I did a workshop day for the first day of the Derby cohort of students. So it was 5 secondary schools within Derby, and groups of Black students from each school came together to Derby University, and they had basically like 3 days spread out. So I was running the workshops for their first day. And I remember talking to some of the Black girls, especially. One of the Black girls was quite vocal about, feeling that she feels, well, it wasn't even just one person. I think it was quite a few of the young people expressed having creative interests, and they felt that pressure of there's a very linear idea of success that has been passed down to them in their families, and their traditions. And it really encouraged them to see someone like myself who is obviously still educated. I got a first class in university. I worked hard during school. So I have, you know, there is proof of my success as well that they can look at. And it's about bridging that gap of like being creative doesn't mean you're not academic. And I think the good thing
Yeah.
about today is that there's a wider variety of courses, both in school, well, both in college and university, and increasingly in schools as well, where there's more awareness being raised on the creative arts. And of course, with YouTubing and more and more influencers and educated people making money and starting businesses using the internet, I think it was good to kind of tell my own little story of that, even though I'm still in many ways at the beginning of my journey and still trying to build, sustainable income from Mental Roots. I've done enough workshops like what I've done with Future Leaders, to see that there is a demand for this. And, it's just a matter of being consistent, keep reaching out to schools and organizations. And I know at the right time, I'll be able to go full time. Worst case scenario, with Mental Roots, I can see it being adapted into a new brand, or something else, because the why behind it is so much a part of who I am. So whether it's under Mental Roots or any other organization, I'm still going to find authentic, creative ways to encourage diverse people to get into the arts and express themselves that way. Because I've seen from these workshops that, like you said, there are some young Black people who have felt that pressure um, to follow certain routes. But I think a lot of it is just lack of education around,
Yeah.
the different roles that are even available within what we call the animation industry. You don't have to be a drawer or a quote unquote artistic person to thrive in the creative industry. You could be project managing, or be a producer, or do all these other kind of sort of roles that are parts of running the creative industries. So it's just broadening their horizons and again showing them a relatable role model like myself, who is uh, carving his own pathway in career wise. So yeah.
In the creative industry, yeah.
Mm,
So yeah. So tell me more about uh, I don't want you to like basically be too vulnerable or talk about personal stuff. But
mm.
since we're talking about like mental health and creatives in the industry, can you tell me about some of the challenges you faced?
So I was one of many other young adults pitching short film ideas to get funded and, to be aired on BBC for, when ready. So yeah, it's basically, wow, about just over 4 years now. Um, and yeah, so if I'm 26 now, I would have been about 21 or 22 around the start of like the Mental Roots animation and the brand as well.
Okay, still
Um,
young.
but yeah, still young, yeah. And I thank God for that. It's interesting because late 2019 slash early 2020, at that time, I already knew um about myself that, I mean, I was a self-admitted workaholic, right? And it's a tricky one because I think there's nothing wrong with being a driven individual, especially when you're very passionate about something. And when you meet a lot of creatives generally, you realize that they're very passionate people.
Yeah,
And to be good at what you do, whether you are a singer, whether you are a producer, whether you are a dancer, as a creative, you're already pouring so much emotional energy into that craft. And that creative craft does take hours upon hours to master. And so for most creative, skills, it does take a unique level of passion and persistence to do well within that art form, especially when job security for a lot of creative jobs is not always the same as for other job sectors. A lot of projects are freelance, whether it's doing a play, whether it's a TV series. A lot of these jobs are temporary, and once a project or a series or a film or whatever is finished, then as a creative, you're looking for the next project that people
yeah,
are funding for. So it's a lot more of a fast-paced sort of industry than other industries in
yeah.
society.
It's very hard to
It's
live in the
Yeah,
moment
and
because you're thinking about tomorrow or
exactly.
the
So
next
it does.
idea. Yeah,
Yeah. So it does take a certain unique level of confidence and persistence to do well as a creative generally. So with that being said, I think for me, that's been a big reason why I've always worked really hard. And even throughout secondary school, I did well in my other subjects as well, like in the maths and sciences. And again, being a young Ghanaian kid growing up, Black British Ghanaian kid, you're taught to love God, to say your prayers, work hard.
yeah,
And I've seen the fruit of working hard, but a struggle with that has been number one, even in throughout my young years, developing unhealthy coping mechanisms for my emotions, when I'd feel lonely a lot of the time. And I'd still be friends or be friendly with people in school, but sometimes especially when I started achieving a lot, I think people started to know me for my achievements more than just the real me. And I found
yeah,
it hard to just find those friends that understood the different aspects of who I am, the fact that I'm black, but also I'm a Christian. There's a certain moral standard that I want to live my life by. So finding friends that don't tease me for my beliefs or my cultural, you know, um, just the essence of who I am
yeah,
and the
yeah, yeah.
intersections of who I am. I just remember not really having that. I had friends, but like the friendships didn't last that long, more because I realized they weren't really aligned with me, or I'd
Your
moved to a different
values and yeah.
yeah, or throughout my life I've been moving to different schools and different
Okay.
places with my family a lot. So that's had also another massive impact on how that the lack of vulnerability I've been able to have with friends and stuff like that. So there's been certain moments I've realized, wow, I'm actually very to myself, and maybe I'm not as vocal as I should be about certain struggles and issues in my life. And adding on top of that, feeling like the work that I do is a massive source of identity. It's almost like when someone asks me how I'm doing, the first thing I talk about is my work. And I think that's just the society we live in general. But especially seeing that in myself, that wow, I just find myself so much by my work, but I don't have much outside of that that defines me. And I've
Yeah.
had moments of burnout throughout, my academic years, being whilst being in sixth form, whilst being in uni, moments of burnout and moments of realizing, wow, like I don't want to spend the rest of my life, you know, slaving away in order to feel significant.
Hmm.
Um, if I'm ever gonna create creative work, and make a living making creative work, I want to see if I can do that doing something that encourages me to take care of myself. So mental roots is me being on a journey as a young black guy of like I'm learning to take better care of myself and develop a healthier relationship with work, a healthier relationship with technology, a healthier relationship with other people as well. And as I learn more about mental health, I'm learning more about myself and the way I work. And, even since starting Mental Roots, I've mental health has actually become a lot more of a real thing that my family has dealt with as well. Without getting too specific, I've got a younger brother who, you know, he's had his own struggles with mental health, and lockdown had a massive impact where
Yeah.
things escalated, and seeing the impact that it had on me and our family was quite hard. So that also really woke me up to how real mental health is, and how, seeing episodes of depression, suicidal thoughts, things like that. I've seen firsthand in family, even whilst building this Mental Roots brand. So, yeah, like, it's just over the months, I've realized like this is a lot closer to home than I initially realized when working on that first Mental Roots animation. So that's what Mental Roots means to me and the personal motivation behind
Yeah.
it. I've started going to therapy this year. It was a short course of therapy that I did. So, as of the time we're recording this, I'm yet to find a new therapist. But
Okay.
I'm grateful for, I did a form of therapy called CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. So that more or less looks at practical techniques to address the roots of certain addictions and behaviors. So, whatever physical symptoms that you have with your mental health issues, whether it's suicidal thoughts, whether it's low self-esteem, whether it's addiction, whatever it is, it's looking at the behaviors and looking for better physical coping strategies
Yeah.
to use to address the root problem, if that makes sense. So whether it's, with my therapist, she gave me some resources around managing stress, and I realized, wow, stress and workaholism, like, and the pressure, is a massive thing that I already started to realize was an issue. You can see it in the first Mental Roots animation, that
Yeah.
sense of pressure that the main character feels. I see that in myself. But going to therapy made me even more aware and gave me even more perspective on how much it impacts certain areas of my life. And I've learned a few different things that I can use to better process feelings of stress and loneliness.
Yeah, and even creative
Yeah.
expression is one of them.
It is. And that's the
Yeah.
thing I love about being a creative, is that you might have heard an artist say before that making this or that is my therapy. And
Yeah.
I relate to that on such a big level, even working on Mental Roots during the pandemic, during the whole Black Lives Matter awakening because of what happened to George Floyd. It ended up being like the perfect timing in a weird but also beautiful way, of like, wow, really living through this intersection of race and mental health. I didn't see that coming when I first thought of the Mental Roots concept, and I pitched it. It was just before the first lockdown, so it's crazy how actually, like, all of this stuff started unfolding, and now the whole world realizes that race and mental health needs to be talked about. It was almost like perfect timing in a way,
Yeah,
although it was a sad time.
yeah,
So even through that, like making the film was actually cathartic for me to process my own feelings and emotions about, injustice against Black people and the mental health effects. Like it was a perfect way to for me to process everything that was going on at the time. And obviously it's still relevant now.
yeah. So tell me, what's the future of Mental Roots? Can we expect more animation films?
Yeah, and to be transparent, this earlier this year and even last year, there was like some funding I was applying for with a friend of mine, because we've got an idea for a third animation, um, and this, if we're able to execute the vision the way we want it, it will definitely be the biggest so far. We're looking to get some professional Black animators to help support it. I'm using the network of my friend Peter Lay, who's an award-winning short film director, and he's done stuff in industry and for broadcast as well, I think. And he does have quite an expansive network of people within the world of film and animation. So he's got a professional network that I'm really looking forward to utilizing in creating even higher quality content. So we're still open to the right sorts of funding to make that vision happen. And yeah, more short films like that. As I'm hopefully able to start going full time with Mental Roots. It's the goal really within the next year or two to be able to do that. Um, and yeah, just more schools we're reaching out to. So, feel free to when this comes out, it'll be great for this episode to be shared with any school or education professionals that you know of,
Yeah,
especially
of course.
people who are heads of PSHE or mental health leads within their schools. Those are the sort of people I'm trying to get their attention and say,
Attention,
look,
yeah.
I want to run these workshops in your school. Could we book out a whole term or a whole academic year with a certain group of students that you think will benefit the most from what I'm doing? So those are the sort of long-term partnerships I'm looking for. And then after that, so within the next year or two, hopefully I'll be able to go full time, and that will mean having enough bookings with schools. More specifically, if I'm able to get 10 schools or ten schools slash colleges or unis that I can have a long-term partnership with, I've got like a 10 session package that I've put together. And if I'm able to go with 10 of those institutions, that should be able to fund a whole year's worth of full-time work, according to the pricing that I've used. So that's the plan really. And then seeing how things go with funding in the next 2 or 3 years, hopefully I'm able to hire part-time, one or two people to help run the brand. And especially helping with marketing, because marketing and editing, as you all know, it can take a lot of time and
Yeah,
energy. So
yeah.
just having more one or two media slash creative people to help with the marketing and content side of things, and at least one other person to help with the education side of things and the workshop delivery. So preferably someone who's more experienced or more qualified within mental health than I am.
Hmm.
Because I am a bit of a generalist. I do have some work experience in mental health, as well as obviously the creative arts, as well as education. So
Yeah,
it's kind of these three different worlds that I've got experience in, but with that comes like there's always someone who's more specialized within each area that you can will learn from, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah.
I'd like to build a team of professionals that are more experienced in each of those areas. So that's really the vision, and who knows, maybe even be able to, if we get big enough, maybe get support from Netflix or any other streaming
Yeah,
service
of
and
course.
make a
Dream big.
special, make an animated documentary looking at different niches of Black mental health, and just find more exciting, innovative ways to make this topic more accessible to people. And yeah, who knows what will happen. And that might birth another production company or like a subsidiary brand or something that partners with Mental Roots. So I'm very flexible with what that looks like, or whether it's all just under the same Mental Roots company. Um, So yeah, as you can tell, I'm a dreamer, but I'm
Yeah,
always focused more on who I'm becoming along the journey. A goal isn't meant to become an idol. It's more about who are you becoming on the journey. And that's how I judge success. It's not, did I reach this number of followers by this time? Am I earning X amount by this year? That's not the true mark of success. It's who are you developing on your pursuit to reach that goal?
yeah.
And if you are becoming more caring, if you are becoming more self-disciplined, if you are becoming a better leader, that is what success is to me. So, yeah.
And where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so we've got our website launched, which is amazing.
Okay.
So it's mentalroots.org, nice and simple. You can find our social media platforms there. When you go to the bottom of the web page, you'll see all the socials there. So mentalroots.org. If you want to follow us on socials, we're most active on Instagram and TikTok. So that's Mental Roots Pod. And roots as in ROOTS, like the roots of a plant. Mentalroots.org is the website. Mental Roots Pod is the tag for Instagram and TikTok. We're also on Facebook as well, but we're more active on Insta and TikTok. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. So professionals who are listening to this, if you work within education, and you're curious to learn more about my professional services, check out my LinkedIn. Nathan Aday is my full name, Addai. Find me on LinkedIn there. The Mental Roots page can be found on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, that's everything on me.
Nathan, honestly, everything sounds so lovely, so inspiring. And here at FYA, we wish you all the best on this journey. And
Mm,
it was very lovely speaking with you and hearing all the good things about mental health. Um, I've been left encouraged, and I'm sure our listeners will be too. So thank you
mm.
and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.